The Davis Museum at Wellesley College is thrilled to celebrate the artists selected as finalists for the 2022 Prilla Smith Brackett Award. Founded and supported by Prilla Smith Brackett, Wellesley College class of 1964, the biennial award honors an outstanding woman visual artist in the Boston area whose work demonstrates extraordinary artistic vision, talent, and skill. The following is a virtual interview with Marie Molteni on June 22nd, 2022, one of 3 finalists selected by the 2022 Prilla Smith Brackett Award journey. We look forward to announcing the recipient of the PSB Award later in September and hope you will join us in October for an evening celebrating the recipient.
My name is Maria Molteni and I use they and she pronouns. I've been living in Boston for 20 years and a lot of my work is rooted in sort of feminist, mystical, queer, kind of histories and interests. And I think a lot about mysticism and the body and athletics and movement and like sort of tactile sort of prayer and how to bring the unseen into like a physical space with an artist's gift.
What 2 or 3 objects are essential to your practice? And if this might just be physical objects, but extends further, that's totally fine too.
Okay. Yeah. So it's funny. My first 3 very honest responses are my car, because I'm just constantly schlepping materials all over the place, making a lot of site-specific work with and in community. My tarot cards are really important. Lately, my hot mat and my blender, because my body is going through a lot. I've been having some kind of health issues. So if we're talking just like art supplies, I use my electric pencil sharpener a lot. I use stones because I work a lot outside. I have to make sure things don't blow away. And wheels. I put everything in my studio on wheels. So it's all very modular and I can move it around. That's very Shaker inspired because they used to put all of their like their beds and things on wheels too. So I'm kind of like a caveman. Stones, wheels, juice.
Awesome. Perfect.
Yeah.
The Prilla Smith Brackett Award is typically a biennial award normally, but of course the last 2 years have been more hectic than most. So I'm wondering what the last 2 years have brought into focus for you and what that's changed in your practice.
The last few years have been very interesting, especially as someone who works a lot outdoors. I've had like a lot of luck and a lot of bad luck kind of both at the same time. I got to do a lot of projects outside, but like with really crazy notice and really weird budgets and, bizarre restraints. But I think also because of that demand, like working outdoors, site specifically, I have really compromised my body a lot. So I've been trying to learn how to take care of my body as I'm doing all of this, and also like educate people and like what artists go through and what we're sort of being asked to do, so that there's more awareness around our mental and physical health. And we are very magical and we do have superpowers, but we also just have bodies. So I'm coming to terms with all of that for sure. A lot of my work is informed by sort of growing up as a competitive athlete and playing team sports, a lot of times with other like women and femmes, like informed my queerness. And now I really like working collaboratively, and I can really be a leader and I can also be sort of like an assist and a team player. And this is something I'm reflecting on a lot now too. I'm like, oh, there are these lessons I learned as a young person about how I can take up space and how I work extra to prove myself, as a non-binary queer femme. It's like, I think as femmes and women, we have to like wear all kinds of hats and just work extra to prove ourselves.
I'm wondering what some advice you've received. Who are the guides and mentors who've given it to you?
I call to like kind of creative ancestors often, like artists that I look to who have passed. And I specifically have been reaching out to people like Frida Kahlo and Nikki de Saint-Phal and Ava Hess, women and femme artists that had chronic illness or struggled with the materials that they were working with in their lifetime. As I'm navigating that and the health of my body, I like want some guidance. And a really interesting thing happened when I was an artist in residence at the MFA. I had one single person apply to be my studio assistant, and there was one single thing on the resume, and it just said studio assistant for Ava Hess. This amazing woman, Martha, who's like in her 70s, had taken a break from the art world for about 50 years. And she was kind of so traumatized by watching Ava Hess die at a young age, like, and sort of how she was treated and how she was valued as being such an important artist of her day, that she kind of like left. And then she decided she wanted to kind of try again, and she applied to be my studio assistant. And it was just like really spooky in like the best way, this amazing way. And it was kind of when I started to have some chronic health issues myself, but she would just like give me all of this advice, like things that Ava had said to her. And, a lot of it was about valuing yourself for your artwork, but also beyond your artwork. And so it's like this really cool thing where I feel like I have this like almost like direct channel kind of through Ava. And I feel like she kind of set this up where like Martha and I take care of one another. And she's like looking out for both of us.
Oh, wow. Okay. Where in Boston specifically do you seek out inspiration? And also, I know that some of your artwork is site specific. So if you feel like elaborating on that too, like by all means.
Yeah, definitely. Site specificity is totally my jam. I create very much in response to what I'm called to do and where I'm called to. I do draw all of my inspiration from this place. I'm just obsessed with all of the nuances of history and culture here. With Boston, I've made a lot of work about the water, the ocean. I'm on a rowing team, so I have this kind of personal mythology and cosmology around this idea of like the seabird as like a and kind of this ocean goddess. I call it goddess. But so I make a lot of work about that in this particular little church called Our Lady of Good Voyage Chapel. I've studied with and by the last living Shakers. So I just like can't get enough of this place.
So if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to go further into your work, Sacred Sheets, and the concept and process of that project.
Like I mentioned, I've been studying Shaker history and material culture and spiritual culture for the last 15 years. And it started with actually traveling to Sabbath Day Lake in Maine, where the last 3 living Shakers live. And I was kind of shy about it, honestly, for the first like 10 years or so of my interest. The Shakers have always informed my work, but I've been making work more directly kind of about them in the last maybe 5 years or so. Some people know about their craft, and I'm certainly interested in their craft, but I'm actually a bit more interested in their ethical values and this idea of them being a matriarchal society. I study a particular period of their history during a period of a sort of American history called the Second Great Awakening. It's a period that the Shakers call the era of manifestations, or they call it Mother's Work. And the idea is that Anne Lee and some of the first generation Shakers and spirits started to appear and reveal themselves to young Shakers, with words and images. And for the first time in Shaker history, besides just drawing like maps and things like that, they started to sort of draw and participate in visual culture. They don't consider it artwork. They consider Shakers to be instruments of spirit, but they're drawing out things they see. And so there's a few different kinds of drawings, but this type you see in front of us is called they're called the sacred sheets, and they're called spirit writing. As you can see, there are these shapes that almost look like alphabets, but they don't really spell anything specifically. And so I decided during a residency at Fruitlands Museum, which is in Harvard, Massachusetts, to recreate one of my favorite of the Sacred Sheets drawings by Samantha Fairbanks and Mary Wicks. I worked with my friend Allison Halter, who makes traditional brooms, and I invited Allison to sort of work with me on like a broom dance that would be also kind of a space clearing of the room. So we make this handmade milk paint from scratch, and it's kind of like an alchemical process in its own. And then painted all of this paper with the milk paint and cut strips that sort of mirror the tiny little spirit written shapes in the original Sacred Sheets drawing. We arranged it on the floor, not unlike, create the creation of a mandala, although that's not exactly the culture that we're referencing, but it is sort of this idea of like a labor intensive process to make a temporary work. I want to be very clear that we're not like impersonating Shakers or saying, oh, this is what they did. This is like our own kind of reimagining of what a creative spiritual process might be like. If you watch the whole film, you kind of see us like gathering inspiration from the environment, and there's a lot of like smoke and work with bees that we're doing in the film. That's because I started studying Shakers and honeybees around the same time, and I've been kind of making work about the parallels between bees and shakers ever since. We chose this diagram as well because it looks a lot like the diagrams that honeybee dancing assumes. So they do these kind of like figure eights and they communicate with their bodies. They also shake ecstatically to communicate with one another. I also kind of think a lot about the brooms as being like paintbrushes, in this context. So I kind of consider it a work of painting as well as performance and movement and film.